one of the main reasons why we're here is obviously to kind of like advocate for something that we think is really important, but also to ask you to submit work to us and tell your friends and to get energy on campus. Like, this is RISD. Like, there's a college filled with like talented artists, and want calls for submissions. But we're gonna keep going with our story,
yeah.
right? Great.
Yeah. So, like, I think a lot of organizing a space for artists to respond to police violence and to like and to provide like a visual identity for like the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, I think it's really important to acknowledge. I think it's really important to like acknowledge the lineage of the poets and the artists who have been doing this work like years before us. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote by Audre Lorde that says, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And I think what that means to me as an artist is that the tools that like white supremacy and the institutions that we are like born into, like we can't use like the same tools to bring justice, and like we have to listen to the voices of like marginalized groups and like people of color and like empower their voices and stuff. And one of the things that I wrote in the Artists Against Police Violence in the call for submissions is, when the tools of white supremacy fail, we must rise with our own tools, whatever they may be, and create a new language toward accountability and justice. And
so we kind of, what we're going to start with is kind of like a body of works, like examples of pieces that have come before that are political arts that tackle these types of social injustice issues. Like I kind of jumped the gun on, is that it's really important for artists to be at the forefront of, you know, political movements. And we created Artists Against Police Violence, like Jess said, to fill that gap. So like here are just a few examples of, you know, like political art that was done before.
And
like work that you might not have seen before too, or you might not necessarily know. This is a quote, sorry. "The rate of police killings now surpassed the rate of lynchings during the worst decades of the Jim Crow era. There was lynching every 4 days in the early decades of the 20th century. It's been estimated that a Black American is now killed by the police every 2 to 3 days." And it's kind of like this quote, I read this and I was like it just shattered me, you know, and it made even more like important why this cause is so important, like why it's important for artists to be articulating themselves and talking and making work and writing, because it's worse than it's ever been, and it's 2015. And I'm sure a lot of you know this image, the Iron Man poster. And like this type of work and this visual language, like this graphic identity, was something that was so bold and so prevalent and so recognizable. And like having a space where images like this can be used and created and given out and disseminated was another important like step to this process of artists. Now we're going into now we're going to show a few selections from the site that people have submitted so far. And what's really nice about the work that's being made is that it's so varied. Like we have graphic designers, we have artists, we have illustrators, we have sculptors, and it's nice too because like clearly like some of the artists are working in the frame of work that has come before, and I think it very much speaks to like the cycle of oppression and how these things and these issues are continuing to happen, unfortunately.
And this particular piece was done by my friend Chip Thomas, who's like, he's a 60-year-old Black doctor who lives in the Navajo Nation, and like aside from this piece that he makes here, he also has a practice where he started a project called the Painted Desert Project, and there's about like 40 wheat pastes and murals that like are in Navajo Nation, and he approaches like the idea of like doing a mural, like repasting his photography in the same way that he approaches like healing his patients and stuff. So I think that I found this project to be really inspiring, and also I wanted to show like an example of like how repasting work is a way for like to like display your work as a part of a movement, and it's not just limited to the internet and galleries and stuff. And a lot of the work on the Artists Against Police Violence website can be like downloaded on high res and can be printed out to like bring to like protests and to be like repasted on walls and stuff.
And this is a piece that's actually done by my brother, who went to Brown. And, sound artist, y'all. But actually, what's so interesting about Jared is that he's not a visual artist, and he was also in the same boat as many of us, is like trying to figure out how to articulate himself. So he literally went to like the paper and figured out what it meant to like express yourself visually. And I think that this is a really good example of people who are not necessarily artists still trying to find a way to craft their feelings and their words in something visual in a visual form. And like obviously this is kind of harking back to the I Am a Man posters, and he's dealing with this idea of layering, and like each layer kind of represents a shot and a bullet and the lives that have been lost. And then at the end it kind of just like blackens out.
Yeah, and also something I wanted to add is that the word man is removed from this, and I think that was a really intentional decision on his part. Yeah. And so as we continue going through this presentation, we wanted to like have people in the audience like respond to the work and stuff. So so what do you all see when you see like an image like this?
I'll say that when I see something like this, I consider that lots of people throughout the country are experiencing the exact same thing that happened in Ferguson. So Ferguson is not an isolated incident, as one of the poets said before, earlier. It is something that is happening continuously. And so this spread that's happening over the country is indicative of the country experiencing these widespread issues.
Continuing off of what Nafisa said, I think for a lot of people who believe that these issues are only happening in these smaller suburban communities, they're happening across the entire country. I mean, for example, Eric Garner, who's in New York, this is ridiculous, and I think it's really important that we're having this conversation and not pretending, oh, this is somewhere else, somewhere where we can't do anything about it. These are our communities. These are the places that we are a part of, and if we're not going to call it out, then it's going to keep happening.
It's a national crisis.
Also, too, the hands being up, it's in the symbol of surrender, and so you were talking, John, earlier about feeling safe. I, for one, and I'm sure many other people do not feel safe. And actually, since the non-indictments, I should say, have occurred, there's quite a feeling, at least for myself and others that I've spoken to, about feeling even more at an unease. And even my walk back and forth to Charles Landing to classes is littered with, new stickers that are saying, like, protect the white race, and, all of this kind of graffiti that's popping up. And the way that people will cross the street or try and avoid you or profile you has kind of gone up a notch. So I think of that also in terms of, people just, wanting to exist, just wanting to live and not being able to.
And this one was done by a RISD illustration alumni, and her name is Carol Lynn, and she's doing a series called Know Their Names, and this one is for Mike Brown, and she and this was one of the first pieces that we published.
This one was also done by a RISD student, a RISD alum, Phoebe Wall. And feel free to also interject and say what you feel. Because I mean, Jess and I and our team have like gone through all of these images and like picked them and voted them. But it's nice to know and to hear back feedback from other people. Because like again, we've been around for a month and like we are looking to grow and expand and to learn, and are always looking for new ideas and opinions on work that we are showing.
And one of the central ideas that we had when we founded Artists Against Police Violence is that like we wanted to acknowledge that the Black Lives Matter movement was actually started by three queer Black women, and we didn't want to how we didn't want it to others to think that like Black Lives Matter only meant like cis Black men and stuff, and we think that how we really believe that it's like it to like follow in their footsteps to rebuild the Black liberation movement to include queer, disabled, and Black women and people all across the gender spectrum. So. And this is a portrait of the founders of Black Lives Matter.
And some of the works that we have here, that we're showing here, we actually have some prints for sale. And some of these books and this side, we have this side. Yes, in particular, we have this also available for sale.
Yeah, and I felt the Black Women Matter zine was one of the most powerful submissions that we got. It's a zine that shows biographies of Black women who've been murdered by police, which I think is like a topic that is often marginalized.
And we really like this submission because it kind of again showed the different ways that we can approach like this issue visually. It doesn't necessarily have to be fine art or design. It can just be crunching numbers and making the data and making a map and like showing, like the reality of it as clearly and as blatantly as possible. And this project turned into a postcard project that kind of has the timeline, the names, and like the quotes and guts that has been created.
I wanted to see the response to this piece, yeah.
That the bodies feel like bodies submerged. It gives this image of like drowning in this like overwhelming pressure and inundation of injustice. And the bronze casting gives this idea of a monument of that fight and struggle.
The hands up are not really a choice.
I'm just going to say that the white face that the figures are on, I'm sure was quite intentional.
done by the student. That's the song. This print we have for stuff.
Yeah. And in this one, I wanted to juxtapose like two pieces that we had that are both created in 2014. And that one is done on a real American flag. And what do you think about these pieces? About like them placed next to each other and what they're trying to say about America as a whole.
The watercolors, the one on the left, right? The one on the left is the watercolor?
Yes.
I think that's just speaking to, like, pretty much what is indicative to the culture of America. Because I think that we forget when we talk about our founding fathers, we talk about how great it was that they left for this persecution, but then a part of that was the actual, slave trade and bringing about slaves and then coming out of that era, the lynchings, and it's just been a part of what America has been. And we try to forget it, so that's just saying it's just inbred. It's like the killing or the lynching is just as American as our flag is.
Well, also the lines are almost indicative of like, you could even say like, I mean, on the left, I think of slavery, and I think of, these lynchings that were occurring, and the bodies, and, rows of, just, I guess like earth, killing the earth and bodies going back to the earth. I mean, it's an intense image. And even now with the image on the right, I mean, this is still very present. Lynching has just changed form a little bit, but it is still ever present and intensifying.
Right, talk about there's a chronology, there's a repetition, and in the repetition, there's unifying is like that kind of bloodshed, that kind of drivenness, the repetition of the bodies, and that it comes up to the present, right? And it's like throughout this whole time in this timeline, sort of the way that it has moved, instead of being like horizontal, right, and lateral, to become this vertical thing. It's like this idea of like this rising, but then still it's happening right now.
You get a sense of layering of the red paint and the resist from the tape over the white lines. You can sort of imagine that each time this happens, it gets washed back out, and the white lines get whitewashed again, and then there are more lives, more hanging figures, more blood, and it sort of adds to the aged, faded black back of the red stripes.
Yeah, for the image on the left, I kind of get this idea that, like the blue and the stars, the blood of all of these like past atrocities kind of supporting this, I guess, limited world that the white people have, or I mean, not just that, like, and sort of kind of like, oh man, I can't really think of the word, but like this sort of realm that they live in,
Right.
and not really understanding what their actions have done, and all the pain that it's like caused.
Like their own reality, like
Yeah.
a different reality. Wait, I don't want to speak much. Yeah?
The image on the left feels very anonymous, and even though we have the imagery now on the right, it doesn't make it feel any better.
Right.
Like we can put a face to Eric Gardner, but it doesn't change the fact that he was murdered.
Right. Yes.
The one on the right, actually, it made me start thinking about the design of the actual American flag itself, which, as far as flags go, is actually kind of like garish and a little tacky looking, honestly. Like, in that it's like really, it reminds me of like, I can't unseparate from like this sort of like very like gung ho, like pro, very like yeah, America. And I remember I was at a protest for some protests a couple months ago here in Providence, and someone held up an American flag with the microphone. He said this symbol represented, like oppression, a country that was built with slavery in mind. And so what it makes me think of is it makes me think of like when people, cheer and applaud for the flag, like what we're applauding for, what symbol we're applauding here. And sort of like putting that right on top of it is sort of like this is an unignorable part of the symbol that we cheer for.
The other thing I would add is a lot of, this culture of almost Fox News patriotism that's been forced upon us over the last decade. We see all of these brand new American flags that are made in China. What's interesting is to see the flag on the left is that not only is it being used as a reminder of what this country was built on, but you rarely ever see a tattered American flag. Now, during the first Ferguson protest here on November 25th, one of the actions that was taken was to burn the flag. And the reason is because the American flag, when flags have become soiled over years, you burn them. And that, the image on the left is a reminder that the American flag has become so soiled with centuries of, hundreds of millions of people killed in acts of genocide and the empire that we continue to perpetuate on the world, that it's a reminder that the flag needs to be made clean.
Thank you for sharing, guys. Any more comments about these pieces? Yes, please.
You were talking about the orientation of the flag. I think it's interesting when you turn them vertical. It reminds me a little bit of like prison guards or just barring in general. And just reminding us the obstacles to face. And also, it's interesting to me that in the one on the left, that the white pillars go up to the sky, and the red blood of the blacks that they only descend. We get pulled down.
Yes.
Can you go back 2 slides, please?
Two
It
slides.
takes me a while to get my thoughts together. So
That's
I'm
all right.
finally there. So this piece and really the kind of the whole hands up symbol is really to me kind of the new choreography of the black body. And so it's not a new symbol, and I'm reminded of, going back maybe to the 70s, if you can remember Roots, and kind of in that movie of Roots, the holding up of hands was an offering of black life to a creator, right, as a sign of empowerment. I think about, basketball and black communities and, going up for the hoop and kind of hands up, again, just as a real symbol of black choreography. I'm mindful of Alan Ailey and his use of hands up in Revelations and all of his beautiful choreography. And so, hands up has become a new symbol of the hunt of the black male, and how we've gone from an offering to a hunt. Is just really curious to me. So it's the new choreography of the black body for me.
Oh, can I say something about that one?
Yes.
It almost seems like the bodies are submerged in something white, and then like the hands up is the only way to get the most of yourself showing, out of this thing that's rising, or you're just headed above water, and just breathe.
Right.
And also building on the last comment, you could make the statement that that's all that's seen is just hands up in a barely recognizable face, but how we don't recognize, we only see these black people in death. They only become human in death, and we don't respect the lives when they're still breathing.
Right.
So this piece was a performance art piece by artist in New York named Heather Hart, and she basically, the piece is called New Numinous Negro, and basically like participants were invited to like approach the head, and like let's go off the head, and was supposed to, in exchange for a wish, and he says that the piece is about the exploitation of Black maleness by buying into the idea of the magical Negro character, and also creating new honor and acknowledgement while giving power to the same of Black maleness. And I was wondering what you all thought about this idea, if you had any responses.
I think it's very rare in artwork that viewers are like asked to implicate themselves in the kind of structures and systems that like led up to the urgency behind the making of the work. That like someone needed to make this work because of the implication with Black males, and there are lots of instances where you see work in museums that makes you feel uncomfortable because you know that it like maybe it was stolen from another country, or like, but if you're not asked to engage with that fact, you're not asked to engage with the idea that like that there's like a certain frivolity in viewing the work, and there's a certain like weird exchange that happens that you're not conscious of. But it's interesting that this work like demands that you acknowledge that fact.
I think there's also something that goes on when people who are asked to interact with the artworks, and the way that it's sort of shown here is that there is, if anybody's ever had to do gold painting, it's quite delicate. It's very, very thin. It's very, very sort of, not so much difficult to work with, but it's a very tender material. It is so, so delicate. And in our culture, in terms of decoration and furniture, or the history of how tops of Capitol buildings are done, or anything like that, that there is value placed on that material, of course, gold. And that there is this place where the person is then engaging in something that is very tender and delicate sort of thing, and to place that value and that delicacy and the tenderness into this action, it becomes something else, right? Other than just like, I'm helping make this what it's supposed to be. It's like, you then probably are to question as a person who's engaging with this, what this material is, how I have to treat it, and how do I place it to create the image of this human being and this person in this likeness. There are so many questions. It's like something that kind of goes much deeper than just what you're seeing.
Right, exactly.
Just to add on to that, along the same lines, but the fact that it's a face and kind of the action of using that very thin film to touch and embrace the face makes it even more tender. As opposed to any other part of the body.
Right.
It is that face, and you're in direct contact with that face.
Very intimate
Yeah.
experience, place, touch. You know,
So there's also this other sadness that exploitations continue as the building breaks off, the red shows, and then there's a desire to recover.
I think we have a few more pieces. This was made by Tiffany Cooper, who graduated in 2012 from RISD.
It just puts me in a feeling that we're just 40 years 50 years in the past all over again. We're just reliving old history. Where no real change has really happened.
This piece came about due to me thinking of the mental state of myself and other Black people during these troubled times. I wanted to make sure there's adequate care being put into making sure the scars of the mind are being treated as they carry weight longer than our physical wounds.
And this piece is by Sonia, who performed today. And is part of the many pieces in the Kindred exhibit that's in the Gilman Gallery right now. And I think that might be one of the first, the first RISD organized exhibitions that features all Black artists and stuff. And we encourage you to check it out. Sonia, do you want to say anything about your piece?
Can I say something about her piece? Her pieces are incredible, and there's an entire wall that is dedicated to the work that she has been doing, and as Jess said, I encourage you to go and see it. She has put such time into this, and it's remarkable.
Where?
The Gilman Gallery.
Going after this.
Should all just
travel together.
Yeah.
Just travel together.
And this is by the piece.
Yeah. I could mention something about it.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this was okay. So this was part of a group show that I curated along with Garcia Sinclair, and these pieces. This was at AS220, actually, the project space, and the cycle of violence. I mean, just I was thinking about Trayvon. I was thinking about how the names keep adding and continuing and building and building and building. And so this is a relief. It's a 3 foot by 3 foot painting, plaster cast. There's a series of them, and it is about just this continuation of this violence, this repetition, and how it doesn't seem to be stopping. And it's just too much.
So, and the piece also did the piece at the very beginning as well, that during the names, during the reading of the names,
All the way at the beginning.
yeah, all at the beginning. And, yeah, and do you want to speak more about this piece too? Or?
I could speak about this. I have family in Ferguson. And so Ferguson has been a part of my life, since childhood. I might get emotional, but I had to do something. And I have a responsibility, and art, I have to make art that is challenging and that has consequences. And I could not look at another image of another person who has been killed and not speak up and say something. So, can I get a witness? It is a neon piece. It is white. It is on a white background, and it illuminates. And it is always shown with a list of everybody who has been murdered by police or people who are assuming the position of police. And I wanted to speak about our collective witnessing of what is happening in this country. And so that was the impetus for it. And I continue to make work like this, and I always will. And so it was a very important piece. I feel very thankful. It was chosen to be shown during Art Basel. It has been seen all over, and will continue to be. And that's all I can ever ask is people to continue to dialogue and actually do something.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, and something that we're really like proud of is that this piece became one of the most widely shown pieces on artists against police violence. I think it's at like 25,000 like notes on Tumblr at this point, and the number like just keeps rising. And we think, and like how like we created a space so people like Nafis and all the other RISD students who have submitted their work to this can feel safe and feel like there's an entire community holding them as they like release this work that can be really challenging and vulnerable into this world.
Yes.
And so the very last piece that we wanted to show is one of the first. Wait, actually before that, there's a quick part of the presentation that I made about like what role does like art play in a movement, and what does this art look like when taken to the streets. And I wanted to show a picture of this piece that JR did in Millions March in New York, and it has the eyes of Eric Garner, and they're held as the protesters as they walk. And I particularly like thought this piece was like extremely powerful. Yeah. And then yeah. And this piece is a continuation of the postcard project that we mentioned earlier called Trail of Silence, and the artist behind it, he led like a performance and a protest in New York, where like on the front of his T-shirt, there's the names of like the victims of police violence, and he's wearing like a reflective mirror on his face, kind of as like an embodiment of like silent protest and stuff. And then on the back, it has the like the dates on the years of the lifetime of the people on the front of the shirt. And we thought this piece was particularly powerful because of how like it started with research, and it turned research into like a postcard project, and it turned that into a performance. Yeah, and something that I wanted to close this presentation with is the idea that like caring. There's like this quote by Audre Lorde that says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence; it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And I feel like having gone through RISD, like we all know like how much RISD values like studio time, and like how much like students like don't sleep and get like stressed out like all the time, and how much all that is embedded in the culture of RISD. And we wanted to just like remind people how important it is to like take care of yourself, and how like a lot of making political work, it comes from like an extremely personal place, and a lot of it is like taking care of your own like sorrow and grief, and through doing that you like take care of like a community at large and stuff, and I also think that in curating and selecting the pieces of an artist against police violence, like it matches like of that same type of caring for oneself as well. And yeah.
Great. So the very last thing that Jess and I are going to share is a collaboration between Artists Against Police Violence and kind of a personal project that I'm trying to start. And I love this quote: "If our ancestors could survive the middle passions, we can survive anything." And this idea of prevailing through history, and as Black people, us as a community, have conquered and have survived so many atrocities already, and that we can't stop now. And one of the things that I've been thinking about with like the I Can't Breathe, and which I kind of like touched on in like my spoken word, but the I Can't Breathe and Black Lives Matter for me are definitely phrases and things that people are rallying behind, and there is some unity there. But for me, I don't necessarily feel like it's particularly empowering. All of those words and those phrases are rooted in like death and destruction and lives being taken, and it doesn't make me feel empowered. It doesn't give me hope. It doesn't give me like a resilience to fear. And I was trying to figure out some type of language around that articulates empowerment for our community, and something that has language that is about prevailing and this kind of idea of moving past, like using our historical context and our lineages to be a power for us, and this idea that we are bulletproof, and us as a community are bulletproof. And obviously using this, like bullets are now, like a lot of people are saying, the new lynchings, and taking that form and owning it and saying that we will deflect, your bullets and your armor and your charges because we are strong as a community. And so this is the idea that Artists Against Police Violence and us and me are trying to start. And I'm imagining that this will live on sweatshirts and live on stickers and live on postcards and live on prints and posters, and kind of this armoring of ourselves and armoring of our communities, and this reminder that we have come from so much already and that we can't stop here, and that is kind of the empowering thing for me that allows me to lift my head and walk down the street and not be afraid, is that knowing that I have strength in numbers and strength in community. And so this is kind of a thing that we're about to start launching off, and like you're all the first people that we're sharing it with. So we are bulletproof. Yeah. So look forward to that. And so I want to sell like sweatshirts and prints and things and give all the money and the proceeds to the families as a support. So everyone's going to get an email about it, and hopefully you can support us. And thank you so much for being here today and listening and sharing with us and sharing your thoughts and your words. We really appreciate it. And thank you, RISD, for having us here. And we want to end with saying we are open for submissions, and we encourage all RISD students, all of your friends, everyone here to submit work and to create work. And it's so nice too, like it was so nice with this conversation, because I've been out of school for 2 years, and like hearing that rigorous critique about work and hearing the passion and hearing these words, it's so empowering for me and so inspiring, so I want to thank you for that. And we want to continue this, obviously, and like let this be the start and not the end. So, any more words?
Yeah, and I think one of the last things I wanted to say is that like the places that you are in the classroom right now is not like we were not like that far from that space when we launched this project, and I still think of myself as a student sometimes, and I think we launched this project in the same way that we launched a lot of the paintings and the films that we created at RISD, and it was the same kind of mentality that probably bring to the work that we're doing now.
So I guess maybe we should say, do you have any questions really quickly? Because I think there's another big part to this thing. After we have a break.
Yes, look at the book.
Yeah, so like if you have any questions for us, or feel free to, we're selling books and pamphlets and prints on the table, and there's also business cards for us personally, and Artists Against Police Violence. So if you have any questions or if you want to ask us something later, please don't hesitate. But if you have anything right now,
What I think we can do, so why don't we take a hard break?
yes.
And that'll give people a chance to stretch. Some people can reach out to you, have some
Sweet.
questions.
Perfect.
You'll be here for the rest of the day as well, right? So even what we're doing next doesn't prevent you from having some dialogue and conversation. So why don't we take a break? And when we come back, we'll start our own RISD kind of installation of our performance, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about what that's going to be and how you participate in that. Okay, so we'll take a quick 5-7 minute break.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
And let's give them a round of applause, please.